the law is that even though you got to burn it, but he's allowed to have benefit from that truma, meaning you could benefit from that truma when you burn it. You could use it as fuel. With that being said, the Mishnah stated you can't use this shemen for this truma that became contaminated, which you need to burn. You could burn it during the weekdays. You cannot use it. You can't burn it on Yom Tov. You can't go ahead and Yom Tov, and the Gemara will clarify exactly what the case is talking about. But let's say it's Yom Tov. I want to light it on Yom Tov, from a pre-existing fire. I want to use this fuel. I can't do that on Yom Tov. Why can't I do that? So the Gemara says, that was what the Gemara said on 24b. Was it 24b2? My taima lefi she'ein sarafim kachim b'Yom Tov. You're not allowed to burn kachim on Yom Tov. You can't burn kachim on Yom Tov, and because you can't burn kachim on Yom Tov, kachim is food that's consecrated. Let's say to the Beit Hamikdash, korbanot that let's say we're talking about things that became tamei. Things that became tamei, I can't burn on. There were korbanos, of course, that were burned in the Beit Hamikdash on Yom Tov, but things that are tamei, that are contaminated, can't be burnt on Yom Tov. And since they can't be burnt on Yom Tov, so too truma. Truma will be a similar law that you can't burn truma, just like you can't burn kadashim. Now the question is, why can't you burn? How do you know? That's the next question. Is my taima a 24b2 how do you know that you can't burn kachim that became disqualified, sacred offerings that became disqualified, kachim? How do you know you can't burn that on Yom Tov? Maybe you could. How do you know you can't burn that on Yom Tov? So, meaning to say, if sacred offerings became contaminated, there's a mitzvah to burn sacred offerings that became contaminated, right? What do you got to do with it? You got to burn it. You shouldn't come to eat it because you can't eat it if it's tamei. It's a very big sin to eat kachim when you're tamei. If kachim that became contaminated, so you got to burn it. So you got to burn it. So how do you know? Well, how do you know you can't? That's a mitzvah. The mitzvah of the Torah to burn it. How do you know you can't do that on Yom Tov? And Rashi explained that there's a mitzvah aseh, a positive commandment, to burn the kachim. And Yom Tov has a lo saseh. The Yom Tov has a Torah says, don't do malacha on Yom Tov. So one of the malachot on Yom Tov is if you burn something which has no purpose for the person, you have no use for something, and it's not being burned for personal use. You can't do that on Yom Tov. So that's on Yom Tov you could burn things that we could use, right? We can have fire on Yom Tov because we have a right to use it. We have a right to benefit from it. But kachim, which we have no right to benefit from, and truma, even if we're going to burn it, and even if we have a right to benefit in general from truma that became contaminated, but we're not burning it for the purpose of enjoyment, because we're burning it for the purpose of the mitzvah. So therefore, it should be a malacha. There should be you're not allowed to burn something on Yom Tov, which is not for pleasure purposes. So being that's the case, why doesn't the positive commandment of burning kachim supersede the lo taseh of you're not allowed to go ahead and do work on Yom Tov? Is that clear, David? That's the first question. The Gemara says, Amar Cheskia, V'chein Tanat Becheskia, Amar Kra. The pasuk says, "V'lo totiru mimenu ad boker." The pasuk says, "You're having the korban pesach. You're not allowed to leave the korban pesach over to the morning. You got to eat that korban pesach that night, right? And that's why the Torah says you count people on that korban, and depending on the size of your family, is whether remember the korban pesach is one lamb that's the first year of its life. It's not a big animal, right? It's ben shana, and depending on the size of your family, you join your neighbor joins into the korban. You got to be smart about how many people are going to eat from it to know that you're going to be able to consume that korban pesach. So you can't leave it over to the morning. The Torah says if you leave it over to the morning, you have to burn it. And it says, "Lo tatirim in the morning, Nathan. Tatirim min ad boker. V'hanotam min ad boker." And the pasuk says, don't leave it over to the morning. And if you leave it over to the morning, you got to burn it. So the Gemara says, why does the Torah say the second ad boker, morning Adam? Why does the Torah say the second ad boker, that if you leave it over to, if you just tell me, don't leave it over to the morning, the Torah could say, and if you left it over, you got to burn it. Why does it say if you left over until the morning? Obviously, left over means to the morning. You told me what's called leftover, don't leave it over to the morning. So they want to say, it means like this. You can read like this. If you left it over to the morning, to the first morning, you burn it the second morning. That you can't burn it the first morning you left it over. Why can't you burn it the first morning you left it over? Because the first morning you left it over is Yom Tov. And that is the source that you do not burn kachim that became contaminated or became invalid, not useful. Like this notar did not become, but you can't burn it. You can't use it. It's something that has to be burned. You can't burn it on the Yom Tov. Good morning, Ralph. So Neba Katuv Litin Lo Boke Sheni L'Seifato. And the pasuk is giving you a second morning. That's when you burn it the following morning. Okay. Therefore, the Gemara compares. Now, Tosfos asks the question: how could you compare truma to kachim? Maybe kachim, Tosfos says, is something because maybe you can't, since you can't have benefit from kachim that became contaminated or you can't benefit when you burn it. So maybe that's why that you won't be able to do that on Yom Tov. But maybe truma, which you have a right, some truma that became invalid, that became contaminated, which you have a right to benefit from, you could have benefit from the light of the truma. So maybe you should be able to do that on Yom Tov. Maybe it shouldn't be considered a malacha. What is the malacha? What am I doing wrong if I'm having benefit on Yom Tov? So Tosfos says, because it's true that you might have a right to benefit from truma that became contaminated, but that type of burning of truma on Yom Tov, you're not burning it for the purpose of enjoyment. You're burning it because of the mitzvah of getting rid of it. Therefore, that's not something that still would be under the violation of don't do malacha on Yom Tov. It still would be something it would not be allowed on Yom Tov. So the Gemara continues. Abaye says he has a different source. The pasuk says we are on 24b, to the right side. Ola Shabbat b'Shabbato, right? We say Ola Shabbat b'Shabbato, v'lo Ola Chol b'Shabbat. So it teaches us. This pasuk says that the korban Ola of Shabbat is brought on Shabbat. Shabbat is brought on Shabbat. The Shabbat offering is brought on Shabbat. But if it's not the Shabbat offering, if it's a weekday offering, let's say you brought the korban in the afternoon, let's say the communal offering that you brought in the afternoon, let's say if it was not completely consumed by the afternoon, all the pieces, v'lo olat chol b'Shabbat. You cannot burn the olah of weekday on Shabbat, v'lo olat chol b'Yom Tov. And also the olat chol, the korban olah that you brought during the weekdays, if it ran into Yom Tov, the same way if it runs into Shabbat, you can't burn the kachim of weekday on the Shabbat. Generally, what do you do in the afternoon? In the afternoon, when you bring your afternoon korban, then if the pieces that the olah, everything has to go on the altar. If there are parts that were not yet on the altar that are not consumed, you could bring it up at night, and that's what the night arvit prayer corresponds to the fats and the ivarim and the limbs that were burning that night on the mizbeach, right? The shachrit corresponds to the morning korban. The mincha is the afternoon korban, but then arvit corresponding to those parts that were still consuming on the mizbeach at night. But you would not be able to put up on the mizbeach the Kodshim that's from the afternoon that ran into the night of Yom Tov or Shabbat. So we see from here that you can't burn Kodshim, so Kodshim would not be able to be burned on the Yom Tov. Let's see what Rashi says. So Rashi says like this. What's the limud? Rashi says you have the parts of the afternoon, the tamid of the afternoon running into Yom Tov, that was not brought up in the afternoon. Certain parts were not brought up in the afternoon. You sprinkled the blood or whatever, the carbon took effect. You can't bring that when it becomes dark. You can't bring those rest of parts when it comes dark on the altar. So Rashi, the kol shekena, certainly kodshim that are psulim, kodshim, sacred things that are unfit, that are invalid, that became disqualified, you certainly can't bring up on Yom Tov. If you can't bring something which is not disqualified, right? You did everything right in the afternoon before Yom Tov. But since it's Yom Tov, you can't burn that item which is not for Yom Tov itself, right? I could bring a korban on Yom Tov of Yom Tov, right? The daily korban, the morning offering of Yom Tov will be brought on the Mizbeach. But something which is not there for Yom Tov cannot be brought on the Mizbeach on Yom Tov, even if it's kosher. So certainly something which is actually disqualified, kodshim psulim, invalid kodshim that became contaminated, I can't bring on the altar, I can't burn it on the altar on Yom Tov. And therefore the Gemara says that's the source that you can't burn kodshim that became disqualified on Yom Tov. And being that's the case, the Gemara applies that also to Truma. That Truma that became contaminated, you also can't burn it on Yom Tov. And the Gemara says, Rava Ama Amakra. Rava says he has a different source. Hu levado. The pasuk says, what could you do on Yom Tov? You could do food preparation on Yom Tov, right? You could do things related to food, certain malachot, not all. Certain malachot you could do regarding food preparation on Yom Tov. And the pasuk says, Hu levado. It says, Ach asher yechel chol nefesh. What regarding what you eat, hu levado yeyaseh lachem. You could cook on Yom Tov. So hu levado, the Gemara says, hu v'lo machshirin. You could go ahead and bake something in the oven. You want to bake your challah in the oven on Yom Tov, you could do that. You had a pre-existing fire, you could do that. But you can't make the oven on Yom Tov. You want to build an oven on Yom Tov? That you can't do. That's called the machshirin. The things that are preparatory items you can't do on you can't. There's only so much you could do that we allow you for food purposes. You know, things you're making this to eat. If the part, but the Torah says hu levado, that specifically that you could do is excluding building the oven, even though you're building the oven for what purpose? For baking. But that far, the Torah did not give you that allowance. And hu levado, that's the who. Who that and not building. And levado, that only that could have said who yeyaselachem. Who levado, v'lo milah shelo b'zmana. T'ati mekavachom. A milah, a circumcision that's not being done on its time, it's a special mitzvah to do the circumcision on the 8th day, right? It even pushes off the Shabbat. It could even mean when do we push off Shabbat? We do Brit on Shabbat, even though Brit is malacha, it even pushes off Yom Kippur. You do it even though you're doing an act which would be considered desecration, you're making a wound, and so on and so forth. But nevertheless, you're allowed to do it on Shabbat. You're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. Not only allowed, you have a mitzvah to do it. But if the Brit was pushed off for some reason, the baby was yellow, they couldn't do the Brit on time, the baby was sick. Now you pushed off the Brit. You cannot do that Brit on Yom Tov. That Brit, if one, or you can't do it on Shabbat once it was pushed off. And we'll see tomorrow how is that connecting to this point that you can't go ahead and burn kodshim that became disqualified on Yom Tov. At this point, I want to hand over to, I mentioned, I don't know, Adam, I left you a message. I don't know if you heard this. If you didn't hear it, just between, I also mentioned to Nathan because I didn't know. I'm going to be leaving now to a Brit. I have the Yalkut Yosef right here. So maybe if someone want to come up, Ralph is on the screen. So if anybody wants to read it, between everybody in the room, whoever wants to come, whoever we have a volunteer. I just want to get a volunteer because it's very straightforward. So anybody going once. If you want, you could start it. You could have Nathan take over for a few minutes. You could start it. You know what I'm saying? We get David. You want to come? Everybody could. I'm sorry that you didn't get my message. So maybe we'll start here over here when the Yalkut Yosef. What's a good subject over here? Yeah. So should we do Tisha B'Av? You know, eating and drinking of Tisha B'Av. Who's exempt from the fast of Tisha B'Av? Want to do that? 246. Let's talk about 246. And it's beautifully by topics. Here. Okay. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Where are we?
David, every minute counts, right? Now we're going to continue. Thank you.
All right. Who's exempt from the fast on Tisha B'Av? So every healthy Jew is obligated to fast, and no one can exempt himself without due cause. Regarding a surgeon who needs to perform a dangerous operation and who must remain alert, see above in the footnote. Let's see.
What page are you on?
Of the, this is the, now we're on the Yalkut Yosef.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're not gonna Gemara without the rabbi.
Okay.
So we're just gonna do Tisha B'Av. I'm gonna skip the surgeon one because none of us are surgeons. So, but okay, even a pregnant and nursing women who are exempt from other fast days are obligated to observe the fast on Tisha B'Av throughout the night and day, just as they are obligated to fast on Yom Kippur. If a pregnant or nursing woman is slightly ill, however, it seems that she's exempt from fasting. Also, if a pregnant woman is known to have a tendency to miscarry, she is exempt from fasting on Tisha B'Av, unless she is toward the end of the 9th month of her pregnancy, even if she has no previous history of miscarriages. If her obstetrician suspects that fasting may cause her to miscarry, she must eat on Tisha B'Av. Likewise, nursing women are obligated to fast on Tisha B'Av, just as they are on Yom Kippur. If the infant is somewhat ill and the pediatrician claims that if the mother fasts, it will adversely affect her milk and it will be detrimental to the infant, she may eat on Tisha B'Av for the sake of her infant. Certainly, if the doctor suspects that fasting will cause the woman to cease producing milk altogether, she may eat on Tisha B'Av. Although there are substitutes for mother's milk available, the mother does not have to take that into account. The natural food for an infant is his mother's milk. If the infant is healthy, however, the mother must fast through the day, even though this causes a temporary drop in her milk production. It is wise for a nursing mother to drink plenty of milk before Tisha B'Av so that her infant will miss nothing because of the fast. Okay, and then, this is relevant. So this year, when the fast is on Sunday, 10 Av, so I believe it is on Sunday this year. So as was explained above, if 9 Av is Shabbat and the fast is postponed until after Shabbat, women who are pregnant or breastfeeding are exempt from fasting, just as they are on the other 3 fast days. These women may eat even in the beginning of the fast day. So even so, they should not eat snack foods simply for their enjoyment. They should suffice with basic foods that will maintain their infant's health. So fasting after giving birth. It is absolutely forbidden for a woman to fast within the first 7 days after she has given birth. After 7 days and through the first 30 days, she remains exempt from fasting, and it is not necessary to obtain a doctor's opinion in the matter. This is especially so in our times when people are much weaker than our ancestors were. Nowadays, no woman should fast within 30 days of giving birth. I thought they were stronger now. Back then, they used to die. No? Okay. Even if she does not claim that she needs to eat, we should offer her to eat. She may eat immediately in the morning, as she does every day. It is likewise unnecessary for her to eat little bits at a time. Ashkenazi Jews who follow the Ramah may nevertheless permit any woman to eat on Tisha B'Av within 30 days of giving birth. Although the doctors may claim that today, with the advances of modern medicine, a woman can safely fast within the first 30 days of giving birth, we may not budge from the rulings of the poskim that she is exempt from fasting. Even so, women should not eat snack foods simply for their enjoyment. They should suffice with basic foods that will maintain their infant's health. And this is ruling of the Shulchan Aruch. So the 30 days are counted on the clock from the moment of the birth, not from the onset of labor. And if a woman gave birth on 9 Tammuz, so I guess that would be Shabbat, she's exempt from fasting. Oh, no, sorry, that's last month. She should exempt from fasting for 30 days, meaning through the day of 9th of Av. If that day is Shabbat and the fast is postponed until the next day, which is 31 days after she gave birth, she must observe the fast. Okay, anyone who is moderately ill is exempt from all the 4 fasts, including Tisha B'Av. Even if the illness poses no mortal danger, our sages did not impose the burden of fasting on someone who is suffering from an illness. He may eat all his daily meals with a free conscience, but he should avoid eating in the view of others. All those individuals who are exempt from fasting because of illness or childbirth may eat all their meals in the manner that one usually eats. It is not necessary for them to eat bit by bit. That is necessary only for those who must eat on Yom Kippur. Okay, furthermore, these individuals may eat their breakfast as early in the morning as they wish. It's not necessary for them to fast even 1 hour. If someone chooses to eat bread on Tisha B'Av, he must wash his hands as usual and pour the water over his entire hand up to the wrist. As explained below in Halacha 32, the act of washing is for the sake of a mitzvah, not for pleasure. Anyone who eats bread on Tisha B'Av, whether it is because he is ill or elderly or because she recently gave birth, does not add the passage of Nahem to the Birkat HaMazon recited after the meal. The Chachamim instituted this passage as an addition to the Amidah and nowhere else. Likewise, when the fast of Tisha B'Av is observed on Sunday and the Balei HaBrit eat a meal to celebrate the circumcision, as explained below, they do not add the passage of Nahem to Birkat HaMazon. In this case, we have the added reason that today is a personal Yom Tov for the Balei HaBrit. Okay, someone recovering from recent illness, not only while someone is ill, but even after he has recovered from his illness, he is exempt from fasting as long as there's a chance that fasting will bring on a relapse. If someone is elderly and weak, his doctor has determined that fasting would be harmful to him, but would not endanger his life, he may eat on all the fast days instituted by the Chachamim, including Tisha B'Av. It is not necessary for him to make a Hatarat Nedarim. Okay, soldiers on duty. So according to what was explained in the previous footnote, that someone who is healthy at the moment might become ill if he fasts, should eat less than a kotovet at a time, it would appear that the same applies to someone who might become dehydrated from fasting. For soldiers serving in places like the Sinai Desert or the Jordan Valley, it is likely that drinking in this manner will not suffice. The Orlet Zion ruled that these soldiers may drink only less than a revi'it at a time, based on the rulings of the Bi'ur Halakha, that in case of an outbreak of cholera epidemic, everyone should eat cholera. What is that? Oh, it's like in desert. Oh, so in the case of a cholera outbreak, everyone should eat and drink bit by bit to maintain their immune system.
They had this situation in Eastern Europe in the 1800s on Yom Kippur, and the rabbi knew that the doctors came and said everyone in the community has to eat on Yom Kippur. And he knew that if he said that they should, they wouldn't. So he actually made kiddush and motzi in the shul on Kol Nidre night in front of everyone and proceeded to eat so that everyone would know that they should eat, and it was sakana. It was danger for them not to eat with that cholera epidemic.
So
on Yom Kippur.
if you don't eat, it just makes your immune system weak and something like that. So Shlomo Zalman Auerbach ruled that these soldiers are in the category of someone who is already ill and not of someone who is now healthy and might become ill. Therefore, he ruled that they are exempt totally from the fast and they may eat and drink on the 3 minor fast days. Concerning Tisha B'Av, however, he ruled that they should only drink and that they may drink as much as they please, but they may not eat since this is sufficient to keep them out of danger. He also instructed the army chaplains to see to it that no training exercises are scheduled for fast days, so that the soldiers will not unnecessarily be forced into a situation where they must break the fast. Okay, swallowing pills with water. Harav Yaakov Kamenetsky ruled that if someone is ill and must take medicine, but he can't swallow the pills without drinking water, he must make sure to drink less than Melo Lugmav at a time. What's that? Just a tiny amount?
I think that's the 100
Okay.
I'm not sure. I had this situation on Yom Kippur 4 years ago after my leg operation, and I had to drink less than 100 milliliters more than every 8 minutes.
Huh. Okay. Did you have to take a lot of pills?
No, I had to stay hydrated.
Oh, it was the hydration.
I must stay hydrated.
Uh-huh.
So this much liquid, but it had to be more than every 8 minutes. But I had to do it every 8 minutes all day.
Okay, pain relievers. If someone suffers from headaches on Tisha B'Av, he can be permitted to swallow a pain reliever without water as long as the pill or capsule is tasteless. If the medicine is flavored, it should be first wrapped in plastic wrap or something similar and then swallowed. This is permitted since it is not the normal way of eating. So I guess you just have to, it has to just be a tiny amount.
I don't know. What did they say about?
It has to be someone who suffers from headaches. You can have the pain reliever, but it doesn't say about the water. Yeah, it needs to be like a bad headache. Okay, children fast. Children under the age of bar mitzvah are exempt from fasting on Tisha B'Av. It is unnecessary for them to fast even part of the day. They are obligated to observe the fast of Tisha B'Av only after they are bar mitzvah, which means 13-year-old for boys and 12-year-old for girls. Feeding children only bread and water. Some poskim ruled that although children are exempt from fasting, if they are old enough to understand the concept of morning Yerushalayim, they should be fed nothing more than bread and water. This is not the common custom. Nevertheless, it seems proper to deny the children treats and candies. Okay, here's a good one. The bathing on Tisha B'Av. So I heard that the 9 days with Sephardim, there is no 9 days. It's just the week of. So it's just there is no this year. It's nothing. It's just Sunday. Um, think, yeah. So there's nothing. It would just be. I heard this last night. I'm pretty sure. So you're saying it would be the whole prior weekend?
Can't have a week like less than 3 days.
Oh.
I'm not sure.
Okay, we have to ask about that. I heard this from a Hasidic guy last night.
and
So
the week, I mean, Tisha B'Av is on the 10th, so the week before the 9th is the 2nd.
right. So it would be,
Don't know.
So it's forbidden to bathe on Tisha B'Av, whether with hot or cold water. One may not even dip a finger into water. If someone's hands become soiled with clay or stool, however, he may wash his hands clean of that soil. He may wash only the affected area of his hand and no more. But it's permissible to wet a cloth on the day before Tisha B'Av and allow it to dry until it is only very slightly moist, not moist enough to wet the hand that touches it, and then wipe one's face, hands, and feet on it onto Tisha B'Av. This is permitted even if one's entire purpose is to enjoy the cool feel of the moist cloth. It is forbidden, however, to use moist towelettes since they are moist enough to wet the hands that touch them. If someone needs to clean mucus buildup from his eyes or dried saliva from around his mouth, though, he may use a moist towelette for these purposes. I mean, in the old days, they only showered once a week anyway. It wasn't that long ago. So washing hands upon waking in the morning. Upon awakening on the morning of Tisha B'Av, everyone should pour water on his hands 3 times on each hand alternately, and then recite the blessing of Netilat Yadayim. This is permitted since the intent of this washing is not for one's pleasure, but rather to rid the hands of the evil spirit that comes upon them during the night's sleep. Nevertheless, you can pour the water on the fingers only, up to the knuckles and no further. This fulfills the basic halachic requirement of washing hands. So the common custom all year is to wash the entire hand from the tips of the fingers to the wrist. This is only a custom. Since on Tisha B'Av is forbidden to bathe, we abstain from this custom and permit only washing up to the knuckles to fulfill the basic halachic requirement. After drying one's hands on a towel, one may wipe one's eyes with the remaining dampness on the fingers. Okay, the Kohanim washing hands before blessing. When the Kohanim prepared to bless the congregation, following the custom of Yerushalayim to bless the congregation on Tisha B'Av, they should wash their hands up to the wrists, since this is the way the Kohanim sanctify their hands in the Beit HaMikdash. It is permitted since it is a case of washing for the sake of the mitzvah and not for pleasure. All right, let's do one more. Okay, Leviim washing hands in order to wash those of Kohanim. In some places, the custom is that a Levi pours the water on the hands of the Kohanim. When fulfilling this custom, the Levi must wash his own hands first. Therefore, the responsa Maharash HaLevi ruled that the Levi may wash his hands even on Yom Kippur and certainly on Tisha B'Av. The Sefer Mata Ephraim, however, limited this leniency, explaining that although the Kohanim wash their hands up to the wrists, the Levi may wash his own fingers up to the knuckles only. All right, Hazaku Baruch. Let's ask about, I'm curious about the 9 days thing for Sephardim.
You know,